The yellow eyes looked at Will again, but they did not see him now. They had grown cold, abstracted, a chill fire mounting in them that brought the cruel lines back to the face. But Will saw the cruelty now, as the fierce inevitability of nature. It was not from malice that the light and the servants of the light would ever hound the dark, but from the nature of things. Herne the hunter wheeled round on the great white horse, away from Will and the single oak tree, until his fearsome silhouette was in the open. Under the moon and the still lowering storm clouds he raised his head, and he made to the sky a call that was like the halloo blown by a huntsman on the horn to call up hounds. The hunting horn of his voice seemed to grow and grow, and to fill the sky and come from 1,000 throats at once. And Will saw that this it did, for from every point of the park, behind every shadow or tree, and out of every cloud, launching round the ground and through the air, came an endless pack of hounds, sounding, belling, as hunting dogs do when they are starting after a scent. They were huge white animals, ghostly in the half-light. Loping and jostling and bounding together, they paid not the least attention to the old ones or anything but Herne on his white horse. Their ears were red, their eyes were red, they were ugly creatures. Will drew back involuntarily as they passed, and one great silvery dog broke stride to glance at him, with as casual a curiosity as if he had been a fallen branch. The red eyes in the white head were like flames, and the red ears stood taut upright with a dreadful eagerness, so that Will tried not to imagine what it would be like to be hunted by such dogs. Round Herne and the white mare they bayed and bellowed, a heaving sea of red-flecked foam. Then, all at once, the antlered man stiffened, his great horns pointing as a hunting dog points, and he called the hounds together with a rapid, urgent collecting call. The manie that sends a pack after blood. A bedlam of yelping urgency rose from the milling white dogs, filling the sky, and at the same moment the full strength of the thunderstorm erupted. Clouds split, roaring into bright, jagged lightning, as Herne and the white horse leapt exultantly up into the arena of the sky, with the red-eyed hounds pouring up into the stormy air after them in a great white flood. But then a sudden terrible silence, like suffocation, came, blotting out all sound of the storm. In the moment of its last desperate chance, breaking across the barrier that had been holding it at bay, the dark came for Will. Shutting out the sky and the earth, the deadly spinning pillar came at him, dreadful in its furious whirling energy and utter quiet. There was no time for fear. Will stood alone, and the towering black column rushed to engulf him, with all the monstrous forces of the dark arrayed in its writhing mist. And at its center, the great foam-mouthed black stallion reared up with the black rider, his eyes 2 brilliant points of blue fire. Will called vainly on every spell of defense at his command, yet knew that his hands were powerless to move to the signs for help. He stood where he was, despairing, and closed his eyes. But into the dead world, muffling silence enwrapping him, one small sound came. It was the same strange high whickering far up in the sky, like the passing of many migrant geese on an autumn night, that he had heard 3 times that day. Nearer, louder it grew. Opening his eyes, he saw then a scene like nothing he had ever seen before, nor never saw again. Half the sky was thick and dreadful with the silent raging of the dark and its whirling tornado power, but now, riding down toward it, out of the west with the speed of dropping stones, came Herne and the wild hunt. At the peak of their power now, in full cry, they came roaring out of the great dark thundercloud, through the streaking lightning and gray-purple clouds, riding on the storm. The yellow-eyed, antlered man rode laughing dreadfully, crying out the avant that rallies hounds on the full chase, and his brilliant white-gold horse flung forward with mane and tail flying. And around them, and endlessly behind them, like a broad white river, poured the yell-hounds, the yelpers, the hounds of doom, their red eyes burning with 1,000 warring flames. The sky was white with them, They filled the western horizon, and still they came, unending, at the sound of their bell-like, thousand-tongued yelping. The magnificence of the dark flinched and swayed and seemed to tremble. Will caught sight of the black rider once more, high in the dark mist, his face twisted in fury and dread and frozen malevolence. And beyond these, the awareness of defeat. He spun his horse so fiercely round that the lithe black stallion tottered and almost fell. As he jerked at the rein, the rider seemed to cast something impatiently from his saddle, a small dark object that fell limp and loose on the ground and lay there like a discarded cloak. Then the storm and the rushing wild hunt were upon the rider. He rose up into his whirling black refuge. The fantastic tornado pillar of the dark curved and twisted, lashed like a snake in agony, until finally there was a great shriek in the heavens, and it began rushing at furious speed northward. Over the park and the common and Hunter's Combe it fled, and after it went Herne and the Hunt in full cry, a long white crest on the surge of the storm. The yelping of the hounds died with distance, fading last of all the sounds of the chase, and above Herne's oak the silver half-moon was left floating in the sky, flecked with small ragged remnants of cloud. Will drew a long breath and looked round. Merriman stood exactly as he had last seen him, tall and straight, hooded, a dark featureless statue. Old George had drawn Pollux back into the trees, for no normal animal could have faced the hunt so close and survived. Will said, "Is it over?" "More or less," Merriman said, faceless under the hood. "The dark is—" he dared not bring out the words. "The dark is vanquished at last. In this encounter, nothing may outface the wild hunt, and the hunter and his hounds hunt their quarry as far as they may, to the very ends of the earth. So at the ends of the earth, the lords of the dark must skulk now, awaiting their next time of chance. But for the next time, we are this much stronger. By the completed circle and the 6 signs, and the gift of Gramarye, we are made stronger by your completed quest, Will Stanton, and closer to gaining the lost victory at the very end." He pushed back his broad hood, the wild white hair glinting in the moonlight, and for a moment the shadowed eyes looked into Will's with a communication of pride that made Will's face warm with pleasure. Then Merriman looked out across the dappled snow-mounted grassland of the great park. "There is left only the joining of the signs," he said. "But before that, one small thing." A curious jerkiness caught at his voice. Will followed, puzzled, as he strode forward close to Herne's oak. Then he saw in the snow at the edge of the tree's shadow the crumpled cloak that the black rider had let fall as he turned to flee. Merriman stooped, then knelt down beside it in the snow. Still wondering, Will peered closer and saw with a shock that the dark heap was not a cloak, but a man. The figure lay face upward, twisted at a terrible angle. It was the walker. It was Hawken. Merriman said, his voice deep and expressionless, "Those who ride high with the lords of the dark must expect to fall, and men do not fall easily from such heights. I think his back is broken." It occurred to Will, looking at the small, still face, that this time he had forgotten that Hawken was no more than an ordinary man. Not ordinary, perhaps. That was not the word for a man who had been used by both light and dark, and sent many ways through time to become, at last, the walker, battered by wandering through 600 years, but a man nonetheless, and mortal. The white face flickered, the eyes opened, pain came into them, and shadow of a different remembered pain. "He threw me down," Hawken said. Merriman looked at him but said nothing. "Yes," Hawken whispered bitterly. "You knew it would happen." He gasped with pain as he tried to move his head. Then panic came into his eyes. "Only my head. I feel my head because of the pain. But my arms, my legs, they are not there." There was a dreadful, desolate hopelessness in the lined face now. Hawken looked full at Merriman. "I am lost," he said. "I know it.
would you make me live on, with the worst suffering of all now come? The last night of a man is to die. The last right of a man is to die. You prevented it all this time. You made me live on through the centuries when often I longed for death. And all for the betrayal that I fell into because I had not the wit of an old one.
The grief and longing in his voice were intolerable. Will turned his head away, but Merriman said, "You were Hawken, my foster son and liege man, who betrayed your lord and the light. So you became the walker, to walk the earth for as long as the light required it. And so you lived on, indeed. But we have not kept you since then, my friend. Once the walker's task was done, you were free. And you could have had rest forever. Instead, you chose to listen to the promises of the dark, and to betray the light a second time. I gave you the freedom to choose, Hawken, and I did not take it away. I may not. It is still yours. No power of the dark or the light can make a man more than a man. Once any supernatural role he may have had to play comes to an end. But no power of the dark or the light may take away his rights as a man either. If the Black Rider told you so, he lied." The twisted face gazed up at him in agonized near-belief. I may have rest. There can be an end in rest if I choose." "All your choices have been your own," said Merriman sadly. Hawken nodded his head. A spasm of pain flashed across his face and was gone, but the eyes that looked up at them were the bright, lively eyes of the beginning, of the small, neat man in the green velvet coat. They turned to Will. Hawken said softly, "Use the gift well, old one." Then he looked back at Merriman, a long, unfathomable, private look, and he said almost inaudibly, "Master." Then the light went out from behind the bright eyes, and there was no longer anyone there.